The night everything went wrong smelled like champagne, crushed gardenias, and lies. Arya Valen had learned how to disappear in rooms like this. Marble terraces glowing over the city, men in tailored black suits, trading half-sentences like currency, women sparkling on arms that weren't theirs. She stood near the edge of the engagement party she was paid to control, not belong to. Clipboard tight in her hand, back straight, smile practiced. One night, good money, no questions. Then the lights went out. Music stuttered mid-note. Laughter fractured into startled murmurs as darkness swallowed the terrace whole. Somewhere glass shattered. Someone cursed. Before Arya could take a step, a hand closed around her wrist, firm, impatient. "Problem in the West Colonnade," a voice hissed. Now. She didn't argue. She never did. Her heels slipped on champagne as she was pulled into shadow, the air cooler, heavier. Gardenias crushed beneath her feet released a sickly sweet scent that made her chest tighten. Her heart pounded. Not fear, not yet. Adrenaline, instinct. Then the hand let go. Silence pressed in. The darkness felt intentional here. Thick, private. Arya turned, breath shallow, and sensed him before she saw him. Tall. Still. Close enough that the space between them felt charged. "You shouldn't be here," the man said. His voice was low, controlled, threaded with urgency. Familiar in a way that made her pulse spike. Earlier that evening, she'd shared a look with one of the brothers, the charming one, warm smile, careless confidence. Eyes that lingered too long. She'd told herself he was harmless, so when she turned toward the voice, rose on her toes, and kissed him, hard, reckless, impulsive. It felt like seizing control of a night already unraveling. For one breathless second, the world narrowed to heat and defiance. Then he froze. He didn't kiss her back. His hands came up, not to touch, but to still her, firm and final. He pulled away slowly, the darkness revealing eyes that weren't surprised. They were assessing, calculating, claiming. "Wrong brother, darling," he murmured. The words cut deeper than a shout ever could. Luca de Santos, the name she'd heard only in silences. The shadow behind every decision. The man no one spoke of aloud. Power radiated from him without effort, without movement. Around them, the terrace lights flickered back to life. An area felt suddenly, terrifyingly visible. Luca studied her like a liability already tallied. Then he stepped back. No accusation, no threat. Just a look that promised this wasn't finished. As the music resumed and the party breathed again, Arya Valen understood one brutal truth. That kiss hadn't been a mistake. It had been a trigger. 3 nights later, the city bled. Arya didn't hear the men at first. Only the echo of footsteps that didn't belong to her on the rain-slick sidewalk outside her apartment. The streetlight flickered. A car idled too long at the corner. Instinct screamed just as a hand clamped over her mouth. She fought, nails scraped. Her heel caught air. Then the world tilted. A gunshot cracked, not close enough to hit her, close enough to warn. The grip on her vanished as bodies moved fast, precise, professional. She was pulled back against a solid chest, the scent of gun oil and rain flooding her senses. "Enough," a familiar voice said calmly. "Luca?" She didn't see his face, only the black silhouette of him as men scattered at his command. No shouting, no chaos. Control descended like a held breath. Luca's arm tightened around her waist, not gentle, not cruel, final. "You've been followed since the party," he said. "Did you think that was coincidence?" "I didn't ask for this," Arya snapped, shaking, anger clawing through fear. "I didn't ask for you." "You didn't have to," he replied. "You were already involved." She tried to pull away. He didn't let her. A black sedan rolled up, doors opening like an answer already decided. Luca guided her inside, his hand firm at her lower back, possession disguised as protection. The door shut. Locks clicked. Only then did the fear fully arrive. "Where are you taking me?" she demanded. "Somewhere you won't die tonight." The car surged forward. Arya pressed her palms to her thighs, grounding herself as the city blurred past. Her phone buzzed once, then went dark. No signal, no escape. Luca sat across from her, calm as a man closing a deal, eyes fixed on her as if gauging the cost of keeping her alive. "This is kidnapping," she said. "This is protection," he corrected, "and it's temporary." For how long? His gaze sharpened. Until I know why you were at that party. The words landed heavy. Arya's pulse spiked. She looked away, jaw tight. The car entered a private garage, gates sealing behind them. The world narrowed to concrete and quiet. Luca stepped out first, then offered his hand. Not kindly, not cruelly. She ignored it. He didn't comment, just watched as she steadied herself, defiance intact. From this moment on, Luca said as they moved deeper inside, you don't leave without me. Arya met his eyes, fear burning into resolve. Then you'd better be worth the cage, she said. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. I am. Arya woke to silence so complete it felt artificial. No traffic, no sirens, no neighbors arguing through thin walls. Just soft light filtering through sheer curtains, and the distant hum of a city kept deliberately far away. She lay still, cataloging details the way she always did when control was taken from her. The bed was too large, the sheets too smooth. The air smelled faintly of clean linen and something expensive she couldn't name. Not home. Her body ached, knuckles bruised, shoulders sore from the struggle, but she was intact, dressed in unfamiliar clothes. Someone had changed her while she slept. The realization sent a sharp flare of anger through her chest. Arya sat up. The room revealed itself slowly. A penthouse bedroom washed in neutral tones. Floor-to-ceiling windows, no personal photos, no clutter, luxury without warmth. A place designed to impress, not comfort. The door opened quietly. A woman entered, older, composed, her gray hair pinned neatly back. She carried a tray of food and regarded Arya with a gentleness that felt rehearsed but not fake. You're awake, the woman said softly. That's good. Where am I? Arya demanded. Safe, the woman replied, setting the tray down. My name is Rosa. You haven't eaten. I want my phone. Rosa met her gaze evenly. That won't be possible yet. Guards stood just outside the door, silent, immovable. The message was clear. This wasn't a guest room. It was a gilded perimeter. Is he here? Arya asked, hating how her voice tightened on the question. Rosa hesitated. He's busy. Of course he was. Hours passed measured by the changing light. Arya explored the limits of her freedom. Bathroom, bedroom, sitting area. No locks on the inside. No windows that opened. The illusion of choice wrapped around absolute control. She ate despite herself. The food was warm, thoughtful, another layer of the trap. When night fell, the city glittered beneath her like something unreachable. Arya pressed her palm to the glass, anger and fear tangling into something heavier. He hadn't come, yet he was everywhere. Guards at every threshold, cameras she could feel without seeing, the way Rosa deferred to rules that were never spoken aloud. Luca de Santos didn't need to be present to exert control. His absence was deliberate. When the door finally opened again, it wasn't him. A suit delivered close. Shoes in her size. A note with no signature. You're not a prisoner. You're protected. Don't mistake the difference. Arya crumpled the paper in her fist. Protection without choice was just a prettier word for captivity. And somewhere in the city below, a man who ruled through restraint was deciding what to do with the woman who had kissed him in the dark and survived. Luca de Santos did not arrive loudly. There were no raised voices, no dramatic entrance, no announcement of power. Arya knew he was there only because the air in the room shifted. Like the moment before a storm breaks. She stood by the window when he entered, arms crossed, spine straight. She refused to turn around first. You've been avoiding me, she said. A pause. I've been observing, Luca replied. His voice was calm, precise, dangerous in its restraint. She turned then, meeting his gaze head-on. In daylight, he was worse, tailored black, posture effortless, eyes sharp enough to cut. No warmth, no apology. You took me, Arya said, without consent, without explanation. I saved your life, he countered, without permission. I didn't ask you to. You didn't have to. The space between them felt charged, compressed. Luca stopped several steps away, careful not to crowd her. Control wasn't proximity, it was certainty. You were followed from the moment you left my family's party, he said. 3 separate attempts. The last would have succeeded. Because of you? She asked. Because of what you represent. Her jaw tightened. Which is? A weakness, Lucas said evenly. And leverage. Anger flared. I'm not some pawn in your war. You are, he said, not unkindly. Whether you like it or not. Arya stepped forward despite herself. Then tell me the rules of this cage. Luca's eyes darkened. This isn't a cage. Then why can't I leave? Because you don't yet understand the danger, he replied. And because I don't trust what you're not telling me. Silence stretched, taut as wire. What do you want? She asked finally. The truth, Lucas said. Why you were at that party, who sent you, and why my enemies believe you matter. I was hired, Arya snapped. That's it. He studied her, gaze unblinking. That's not the whole truth. She said nothing. Luca nodded once, as if confirming a calculation. Until I have answers, you stay here. You'll be treated with respect. You'll have everything you need. And if I refuse? You already have, he said quietly, and you're still here. The implication settled heavy between them. This ends when I decide it ends, he continued. You don't speak to anyone without my approval. You don't leave, and you don't test my patience. Arya's pulse hammered, but she lifted her chin. And what do you get out of this? For the first time, something flickered across Luca's face. Something unreadable. Control, he said. Then, softer, almost to himself, and certainty. He turned to leave. As the door closed behind him, Arya realized the truth that chilled her more than fear. Luca DeSantis wasn't deciding whether to protect her. He was deciding whether to keep her. Alone again, Arya let the silence press in until it hurt. Luca's words echoed long after the door closed. I don't trust what you're not telling me. He shouldn't. She hadn't earned it. She moved to the edge of the bed and sat, hands clenched so tightly her nails bit into her palms. The penthouse felt smaller now, walls closing in with memories she'd spent years outrunning. She hadn't planned to be at the DeSantis party, not at first. The truth surfaced in fragments, the way it always did, out of order, edged with guilt. 6 months ago, a call she hadn't answered in years had come through in the middle of the night. Her sister's voice, thin, shaking, wrapped in panic. Medical bills, a bad decision. A man who didn't take no for an answer and worse, didn't forget it. Arya had done what she always did. She fixed it. She took extra contracts, quiet ones, cash only, no paper trail. She told herself it was temporary, that she was still in control, until control slipped. The DeSantis engagement party had arrived through a private referral, an offer that paid too well for a night's work. When Arya asked questions, the answers came too fast, too polished. She'd known then, but desperation made her reckless. She told herself she wouldn't cross lines, wouldn't listen, wouldn't look too closely, just manage the event and walk away with enough money to make the threats stop. She hadn't expected the darkness, or the kiss, or Luca. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Rosa entered with tea, setting it down without a word. She lingered, then spoke carefully. You look like someone carrying something heavy, Arya laughed bitterly. You don't know the half of it. Rosa's eyes softened. Men like him, she said gently, they don't tolerate lies, but they do understand sacrifice. Do they? Arya asked. Or do they just justify cruelty with it? Rosa didn't answer. That night, Arya lay awake staring at the ceiling, the weight of her choices pressing down. Luca wanted the truth, but the truth wasn't clean. It implicated her in a game she never meant to play. And worse, if he knew why she'd accepted that job, if he knew who she'd been trying to protect, he wouldn't see her as a risk. He'd see her as a bargaining chip. By morning, Arya made a decision. If Luca DeSantis wanted answers, she would give him some. Just not the ones that could get her sister killed. Luca didn't summon her, he waited. By the time Arya was escorted into his study, she understood that the delay was intentional. Power didn't rush. It let anticipation do the work. The room was darker than the rest of the penthouse. Wood-paneled walls, a single lamp, the city reduced to distant glitter behind thick glass. Luca stood by the desk, jacket off, sleeves rolled, as if preparing for something precise. Sit, he said. She didn't. You asked for the truth, Arya said. I'm here. Luca studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Then listen first. He moved to the desk and opened a folder. Inside were photographs. Her apartment building, the alley behind her favorite cafe. A grainy shot of her sister stepping out of a clinic, a man lingering too close behind her. Arya's breath caught. "You've been careful," Lucas said, "but not invisible." She swallowed. "How long?" "Longer than you think." He closed the folder gently, as if the contents were fragile. "You took the DeSantis contract because someone needed money. Quickly, quietly." Arya's voice shook despite her effort. "You said you wanted the truth." "I do," Luca replied. "I also want you to understand that lies don't protect the people you love. They expose them." Her fists clenched. Then why is she still breathing? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Luca didn't flinch. "Because I intervened," he said simply. The room tilted. "I moved her," he continued. "Paid the debts, removed the man who thought he owned her time. She's safe. She has been since the night of the party." Tears burned, unwanted and furious. "You had no right." "I had every reason," Lucas said. "She was leverage. Against you." Silence roared. "So you've been watching me," Arya whispered. "Yes." "For how long?" Luca hesitated, just enough to matter. "Since before the party." The admission landed heavy. "Not obsession, vigilance." "I didn't take you to punish you," he said. "I took you because if my enemies believed you were useful, they wouldn't stop. And because you wouldn't stop sacrificing yourself to fix problems that weren't yours to bear alone." Arya laughed weakly. "You say that like it's mercy." "It is," Luca said. "From me." She looked at him then, not the mafia boss, not the shadow, but a man carved hollow by responsibility. A man who'd seen this story end badly too many times. "You could kill me," she said. "Yes. But you won't." "No." "Why?" His gaze held hers, unwavering. "Because you didn't betray for profit. You did it for love." The words undid her more than any threat ever could. The truth hung between them, heavy but intact. Arya waited for the sentence. She had lived long enough knowing how men like Luca DeSantis balanced mercy against necessity. In his world, understanding didn't erase consequences. It only clarified them. "You used my family's event as cover," Luca said calmly. "You accepted money connected to people who wanted leverage over me." "I didn't give them anything," Arya said quickly. "No names, no access." "I know." The certainty in his voice stopped her cold. "They hoped proximity would do the rest," he continued. "A mistake, a rumor, a moment they could twist." Her throat tightened. "And I gave them one." "Yes," Luca said. "You did." The admission felt like a blade. Arya braced herself. "In my world," he went on, "that kind of risk is usually answered with blood." Her breath hitched. "But," Luca said, stepping closer, "you weren't reckless. You were cornered." He stopped in front of her, close enough now that she could feel the heat of him, the restraint coiled beneath stillness. "You could have run," he said. "You didn't. You could have begged. You didn't. You could have sold me something real. You didn't." Arya lifted her chin, eyes burning. "I won't apologize for protecting my sister. I'm not asking you to." The words landed like a reprieve she hadn't dared hope for. "You made yourself a liability," Lucas said. "But you didn't make yourself an enemy." He turned away, as if the decision cost him more than he'd allow her to see. "My enemies are dealt with," he continued. "Quietly, permanently. The men who believed you were bait won't be a problem again." Arya's pulse raced, not at the violence implied, but at the finality of it. "And me?" she asked. Luca faced her again, expression unreadable. "You live, not as a threat, as a verdict." "You'll never work for them again," he added. "You'll never be used against me. And you'll never put yourself in that position again." "And if I refuse?" A pause. "Then I stop protecting you," Luca said softly. "And the world takes its chances." Arya understood then. This wasn't punishment. It was a boundary, one drawn not in anger, but in control. "You spared me," she said. "I judged you," Luca corrected, "and found you worth the risk." For the first time since the night of the kiss, Arya felt something shift. Not safety, but trust. Fragile, dangerous, and real. Luca didn't frame it as a demand. That was what made it terrifying. He poured a glass of water and set it in front of Arya. a small gesture of normalcy in a room that had decided her fate more than once. Then he leaned against the desk, posture relaxed, eyes intent. "You have a choice," he said. Arya almost laughed. "You just told me the alternative is being alone in a city that wants me dead." "Yes," Luca replied. "That is one option." She stared at him. "That's not a choice. That's coercion." "No," he said calmly. "Coercion removes consent. I'm giving you terms." He straightened. "You stay under my protection, publicly, permanently. No more shadows, no more half measures." Her chest tightened. "And the conditions?" "You stop running," Lucas said. "You tell me the truth when it matters, and you remain in my world." "In your house," she corrected. "In my family," he said. The word landed heavy. "This isn't a threat," Luca continued. "You'll have autonomy, work, purpose, freedom within reason. I don't cage what I choose to protect." "And what are you choosing?" Arya asked. Luca's gaze held hers, unflinching. "You." Silence stretched. She searched his face for manipulation and found something colder and more honest. Responsibility. He wasn't offering romance. He was offering shelter wrapped in obligation. "If I accept," she said slowly, "what do people think I am to you?" Luca didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was lower. "Untouchable." The promise vibrated with danger. "And if I leave?" "I will let you," he said. "Once. After that, I won't be able to guarantee anything." Arya turned away, heart pounding. The city glowed below, beautiful, merciless. She thought of her sister safe because of a man she'd kissed by mistake. Thought of a life spent dodging threats and debts, and men who always demanded more. This offer wasn't freedom, but it was stability. "And what do you get?" she asked. Luca exhaled slowly. "Certainty, control, and the knowledge that I won't find your name on a list of the dead." She closed her eyes. When she spoke again, her voice was steady. "This isn't about me, is it?" "No," Luca admitted. "It's about what you mean to others." She nodded. "I'll stay," Arya said. "On one condition." Luca's brow lifted slightly. "Name it." "My sister never pays for my choices," she said. "Ever." His answer was immediate. "She won't." Arya met his gaze. The contract wasn't written. It didn't need to be. She had just agreed to live in the lion's den, not as prey, but as something worth guarding. The morning light filtered through sheer curtains, soft and almost cruelly ordinary. Arya sat at the edge of the bed, hands wrapped around her teacup, feeling the weight of the choice she had made settle into her bones. She had surrendered her freedom, not entirely, but enough. Not for herself, but for someone who had never asked to be caught in the crossfire of her life. Her sister's safety was no longer a fragile gamble. The threats that had shadowed her steps were now contained by Luca's meticulous control. Every enemy she had feared had been neutralized, quietly, permanently. And yet, the cost was hers alone. She stood and walked to the window, watching the city sparkle like a promise she didn't fully trust. Every step reminded her that she had given up a piece of her autonomy to live another day. She had traded independence for protection, chaos for calculated safety. Rosa entered quietly, eyes kind but knowing. "Decision made?" she asked. Arya nodded, voice barely a whisper. "I'm staying, but not for me, for her." Rosa's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's what makes you strong." Arya closed her eyes, letting herself feel the weight and the relief simultaneously. She had made herself vulnerable, willingly. That was her choice. And in that vulnerability, she found an unfamiliar sense of power. Later, when Luca appeared, his presence filled the room without needing sound. He didn't smile. He didn't demand acknowledgement. He simply observed. "You understand the stakes," he said. "Yes," she replied. Her voice was steady, stronger than she had expected. "And I accept them. Not for me, but for her, my sister." A faint, almost imperceptible shift crossed his face. Approval. Recognition. Something human, softened by the veneer of control he always wore. "You've chosen wisely," Lucas said. "Most people wouldn't understand what that requires." Arya met his gaze, unwavering. "I understand, and I'm not afraid of the consequences." He studied her a long moment, then nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Then we proceed, carefully, together." The words felt like both a warning and a promise. Alone, she exhaled, the tension draining from her shoulders in a slow, measured release. She had given up a piece of herself, yes, but she had gained something equally precious. A life safeguarded, a family protected, and the beginning of trust in a world that had never offered her choice. For the first time since the party, Arya Valin felt a quiet, heavy kind of strength. She had surrendered, but in surrender she had chosen. And sometimes that was the only way to survive. The drive to the outskirts of the city was silent, but the tension was tangible. Arya sat rigid in the passenger seat, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Every streetlight that passed cast fleeting shadows across her face, shadows that mirrored the doubts she had fought so hard to suppress. Luca didn't speak. His eyes remained on the road, calculating, vigilant. She had learned by now that silence from him carried weight. Every pause, every unspoken word had purpose. They arrived at a secluded residence, shielded by tall hedges and security cameras hidden among the greenery. Arya's breath caught. She recognized the building. It was where her sister had been taken days ago, safely, quietly, out of reach from the men who had hunted them, out of reach from anyone who might exploit them. Luca stepped out first, then gestured for her to follow. Inside, the room was calm, warm, familiar. Her sister looked up, eyes wide, then relief flooded her face. She ran forward, arms wrapping around Arya in a tight, trembling embrace. "I thought," her sister whispered, voice breaking. "You're safe," Arya said, holding her just as tightly. "I promised." Her sister's grip loosened, and she looked up at her with tears glimmering. "I didn't know you. I didn't know anyone could protect me like this." Arya's chest tightened, a mix of exhaustion, relief, and lingering fear pressing down. "Someone did," she said softly, glancing toward Luca. "Someone very dangerous." He stepped forward, hands folded behind his back, face impassive. His gaze swept the room, calculating. Then, subtly, he softened, not completely, but enough. A gesture small but meaningful, a silent acknowledgement that his promise had been kept. Her sister turned to him, tentative. "Thank you," she said quietly. Luca inclined his head slightly, the faintest acknowledgement of civility, and then turned back to Arya. No words were needed. The unspoken truth hung between them. He had protected what she held most dear, exactly as he had promised. For Arya, that was enough. She exhaled, letting a fraction of the weight lift from her shoulders. The reunion was proof, not just of safety, but of trust. Luca had kept his word. He had contained the chaos, neutralized the threat, and returned what mattered most intact. For the first time in months, Arya felt something approaching relief. A quiet, fragile assurance that survival didn't have to come at the cost of love, loyalty, or family. And in that room, the DeSantis penthouse and the world outside felt a little less like a prison, and a little more like the beginning of something she could navigate. Carefully, cautiously, but with hope. Days blurred into weeks in the penthouse. Arya learned the rhythm of Luca's world. Not the violence, not the whispered threats, but the measured moments he allowed for life beyond control. Morning light spilled across pristine marble floors as she moved through the space he had claimed for both of them. The apartment no longer felt like a gilded cage. It was a stage where rules were absolute, but small gestures of softness were possible. Rosa ensured the details of her life were managed, meals prepared, schedules coordinated, messages filtered. But Luca's presence was no longer omnipresent. He trusted her to move through the space without constant surveillance, to make decisions within boundaries he had silently drawn. She discovered small traces of him in the day-to-day. A book left on the coffee table, a jacket draped over the chair she preferred, a glass of water waiting for her in the morning, little acknowledgments of attention without intrusion, gestures of thoughtfulness wrapped in restraint. And she watched him in return. He would arrive in the living area silently, watching the city beyond the windows, absorbed in planning, calculating, existing. Yet in those rare moments when his gaze met hers, it was softer, not absent of authority, but absent of threat. Meals became a quiet ritual. Tea in the mornings, conversations at dinner, brief, measured, sometimes lingering just enough to feel human. One evening, she found herself laughing at a story Rosa told, a small, mundane thing, and Luca's presence did not shadow it with tension. Instead, he observed from the doorway, expression unreadable, yet there was a tilt to his posture that suggested approval. Arya realized she was adjusting, not entirely yielding, but learning to coexist with someone whose power once terrified her. Her defiance had not vanished. It had found its place in negotiation, in understanding the rules without surrendering her identity completely. And Luca, for his part, revealed glimpses of a life beyond control. A carefully chosen record playing in the study, a pen sketch pinned to the board, something personal he hadn't shared before. Each fragment humanized him, softened him without erasing the danger that was always present. They existed in parallel now, her independence guarded, his authority intact. And slowly, cautiously, the tension between them began to shift. Less a trap, more a partnership forged from necessity, protection, and an unspoken acknowledgement of desire. For Arya, the penthouse was no longer merely a prison. It was a space where survival intertwined with trust, where boundaries were respected, and where a fragile, simmering connection between her and Luca began to bloom quietly, deliberately, under the watchful city lights. Arya never asked for the details. Luca didn't offer them. From the safety of the penthouse, she sensed the consequences of his decisions like a shadow pressing against the walls, quiet, inevitable, complete. The men who had tracked her, who had threatened her family, simply ceased to exist in her life. Names she had feared were never spoken again. Places she had avoided were suddenly empty. It was a world sanitized of immediate danger, but Arya understood it was only because he had orchestrated it with precision. The penthouse remained untouched by chaos, the city below unaware of the subtle shifts in power that had been enforced silently, efficiently, without fanfare. Once she had tried to ask Luca about one of the men who had disappeared. "They won't be a problem," he said, voice neutral, eyes unreadable. "And they won't return." She had pressed further. "You don't need to know," he replied. "You survived. That is enough." Arya accepted it. Though unease lingered like a perfume she could not shake, she trusted him, even as the darkness he wielded remained unseen. And perhaps that was the point. Threats that once shadowed her life, the anonymous calls, the strangers at her door, the whispered rumors, ceased. Her sister lived quietly, out of reach. Arya could step outside without flinching at every shadow. Yet the knowledge that Luca's reach extended far beyond what she saw kept her alert. She had traded fear for trust, but not for ignorance. Every door, every camera, every quiet guard at the threshold reminded her that the world outside was dangerous, and that the power keeping her safe had teeth she dared not see. And Luca, as always, remained an enigma. He did not boast of victories. He did not recount the men who had vanished from the city like shadows in fog. He allowed the consequences to ripple silently, letting Arya live without fear, letting her world feel secure, while the chaos existed elsewhere, managed, contained, eradicated. It was the kind of protection that left no scars for the visible eye. Only she knew the depth of what had been done in her name. She began to understand that survival in Luca de Santis's world was not just about being alive. It was about living under the shadow of a man whose sense of justice was absolute, silent, and terrifyingly effective. And in that silence, Arya realized something new. The city could be cruel, the enemies relentless, but there were corners of safety carved out by hands as ruthless as any danger she had faced. And those hands now guarded her. Her life was no longer entirely her own, but it was hers to live. It was late. The city lights spilled through the penthouse windows, painting Luca's study in gold and shadow. Arya lingered just outside the room, hesitating, sensing a rare stillness in the space he occupied. She had grown used to his control, to his distance, and yet tonight there was something different, something quieter. He looked up from the desk as she entered, not startled, not guarded, just present. His usual precision was softened by fatigue, or perhaps by choice. "I didn't know you drew," Arya said, noticing a sketch pinned to the board, a study of the city skyline, lines fluid, imperfect, human. Luca glanced at it, expression unreadable. I don't show people this. She stepped closer. Why not? Because most people wouldn't see it, he said. They'd see what they want to see, not what is. Arya studied him, seeing the faint crease in his forehead, the subtle tension in his shoulders. The fortress of control he carried was still there, but now she glimpsed the man beneath. Do you ever get tired of it? She asked softly. The control, the power, the constant calculation? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved to the window, looking out at the city he ruled with precision. And for the first time, his voice carried something vulnerable, almost wistful. Sometimes, Luca admitted, sometimes I wonder if any of this is enough, if it ever will be. Arya's breath caught. This wasn't the threat she had feared, not the dominating force that had captured her, not the shadow that had pursued her sister. This was a man, alone in a room with the skyline as his witness, carrying burdens he refused to share with anyone until now. Then, what do you want? She asked. He glanced at her, eyes softer than she'd ever seen. A home, a space that feels like mine, that isn't just about rules, fear, or obligation. Arya took a step closer, unsure, daring, drawn by the honesty. Do you think that's possible? He let the question hang. Then he nodded slowly. Maybe, with trust. Maybe with someone willing to stay despite everything. For the first time, the distance between them felt bridgeable. The man who had seemed untouchable, cold, and calculating revealed a fragment of humanity, a longing for connection, for normalcy, hidden beneath the weight of the world he commanded. Arya realized that she had seen the monster and the protector, the captor and the guardian, but never the man who just wanted to be seen. And in that quiet penthouse, under the soft glow of city lights, Luca de Santis became more than a mafia boss. He became human. The penthouse was quiet, save for the soft hum of the city beyond the windows. Arya lingered near the balcony, the night air cool against her skin, brushing through loose strands of hair. Luca approached silently, his presence filling the space without a word. You stayed, he said, voice low, measured. She turned, meeting his gaze. I promised I would. There was no need for words beyond that. The city below glittered like distant stars, indifferent to the fragile moment unfolding above. For once, there were no threats, no deadlines, no enemies lurking in shadow. Luca stepped closer, not menacingly, not possessively, but with intent that pulled at something deep within her, a mixture of trust, desire, and relief. You could have left, he said softly, but you didn't. I needed to stay, Arya admitted, her voice trembling just slightly, for her, and maybe for me too. He regarded her quietly, the weight of unspoken understanding hanging between them. Then, as if the city itself held its breath, he closed the distance. His hand reached for hers, not demanding, not claiming, but asking. She placed her hand in his, the warmth of his skin grounding her in the moment. The gesture was simple, but in it, there was everything: trust, acceptance, and an acknowledgement that the space between them had shifted. Luca's other hand rested gently against her waist, careful, deliberate. She didn't pull away. She didn't resist. This wasn't a surrender. It was a choice. When their lips met, it was tentative at first, a soft collision that carried the weight of weeks spent under tension, fear, and uncertainty. Then slowly, the kiss deepened. Not reckless, not desperate, but earned. It was a union not just of bodies, but of understanding. Arya felt the trust she had placed in him reflected back, a promise mirrored in touch, in restraint, in the acknowledgement that they had survived the storm together. Pulling back slightly, Luca rested his forehead against hers. This is ours, he whispered. Arya nodded, letting the night air mingle with the lingering warmth of connection. The city below hummed on, oblivious, but for the first time, she didn't care. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a declaration that trust could exist even in darkness, that love could emerge in the midst of danger, and that a bond forged through fire could hold, steady and unbroken. The penthouse, once a place of containment, now held a different meaning. It was home, not entirely safe, not entirely free, but a space where two souls, scarred and cautious, chose each other. And in that choice, they found a fragile, powerful peace. The city continued to pulse below, oblivious to the quiet victories unfolding high above in the penthouse. Arya stood at the balcony, hand in Luca's, feeling the hum of life beyond the walls that had once confined her. She had surrendered parts of herself, yes, but in doing so, she had chosen strength over fear, protection over recklessness, love over isolation. Luca's presence beside her was steady, unwavering, a reminder that trust, once earned, could be more powerful than any threat, more enduring than any control. He didn't demand gratitude, he didn't demand submission. He simply existed as both guardian and partner, a man shaped by duty, yet softened by connection. "You're quiet," he said softly, eyes tracing the lines of her face in the glow of the city lights. "Just thinking," Arya replied, "about everything that brought me here and how I survived it." "You didn't just survive," Luca said. "You adapted. You chose wisely." She let herself smile, faint and fragile, but real. The weight of fear that had once pressed against her chest had lifted, replaced by a calm, measured certainty that life, even in darkness, could be navigated with care, strategy, and the right alliances. The lessons were clear. Trust could be earned. Love could exist in dangerous places. Family, both by blood and by choice, was worth sacrifice. Arya realized that the penthouse, the city, even the dangers that still lurked beyond their walls, no longer dictated her life entirely. She had agency, she had allies, and she had a connection that transcended the violence, the power struggles, the shadows. Lucas squeezed her hand gently, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had survived together. And in that gesture, she understood something fundamental. Darkness did not preclude hope. Chaos did not preclude choice. And even in a world ruled by fear and power, trust and love could take root, quietly, persistently, and enduringly. Arya turned to him, eyes steady. "We survived," she said. "Yes," Luca agreed, voice low but certain. "And we will continue to." The city hummed below, indifferent and relentless, but within the walls of the penthouse, two lives intertwined, scarred but resilient, had found equilibrium. They were not unbroken, but they were together, stronger for every storm that had brought them to this fragile, luminous peace. And for the first time since that night of mistakes and missteps, Arya Valin understood the truth. Trust could be the ultimate strength, and love could thrive, even in darkness. As the penthouse lights dimmed and the city stretched endlessly below, Arya and Luca stood side by side, hands entwined, the hum of the metropolis a distant, rhythmic backdrop to a moment of fragile peace. Their journey had been shaped by danger, deception, and unspoken truths. Every choice, every sacrifice had led to this: a fragile home, trust forged in fire, and a connection neither expected but both needed. Arya gazed out at the skyline, heart steady, mind clear. She had surrendered fear, yet retained her strength. She had entrusted her life to Luca, and he had proven worthy, not just as a protector, but as a partner, a man capable of tenderness beneath the shadows of power. Luca, ever watchful, ever controlled, allowed himself a small, rare smile. No words were needed. The silence spoke volumes. Survival had become trust, and trust had become something more, something enduring. For the viewer, the story leaves a question lingering, one as potent as the choices that shaped Arya's fate. What would you do if your survival depended on trusting someone you feared, but couldn't resist? Could love and loyalty truly exist in a world ruled by danger and power? And when faced with impossible choices, would you sacrifice freedom for safety, or safety for love? The night deepened. The city sparkled below, indifferent yet beautiful. And in the penthouse, Arya and Luca embraced the truth they had carved together: that trust could be strength, love could thrive in darkness, and home could be chosen, even amidst chaos. Would you have trusted Luca if you were in Arya's place? Could you surrender part of your freedom to protect someone you love, even in a world of danger? Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your support helps me bring you even more emotional, heartwarming stories filled with love, tension, and unforgettable moments. Stay tuned. More beautiful stories are on the way.